Now, if you were to start a job, you got a 9-to-5 job. Let's say you were like, a responsible adult and you went and got a real job and you were a Christian and you wanted to, do the Lord's work and witness the gospel at your job. The second you put a cross on your desk, okay, every single solitary person at that job saw that cross. Everybody knows you're a Christian now. You haven't opened your mouth yet. Every single one of them also has a firmly committed presupposition about you. Most of them are negative, depending on where you live. If you live out here in California, a lot of them will be negative. If you don't know what the negative ones are, let me clue you in. They think you're anti-gay. They think you're anti-science. They think you're dumb. If you don't recognize that I'm painting a picture that is really how it works, get out of the apologetics industry. Why? Because you're probably not helping. If you don't understand that that's really how it works, you put a cross on your desk, every single solitary person saw that cross. And furthermore, to complicate matters, it was a lightning rod. If you put it in the Bible Belt, a lot of people might have had a positive association with it. But if you put it out here in California, most of the associations are negative and firmly entrenched ones too. Now, if it were 1955, totally different ballgame. You put that cross on the desk, believe it or not, they would have had automatically positive associations about you. They would have automatically presupposed good things about you. Oh, Craig's got to be such an honest, good man. They would have been right in my case. I bet when he gets off work, he builds, he helps build orphanages for, I bet you he serves ice cream to handicapped kids. He's such a good man. That's what they would have automatically presupposed circa 1955. Believe it or not, that ghost of that idea still exists. When I used to work at, right down the road, there was a, what was it called? PC Greens. It was a Whole Foods-like place. It was a local private supermarket, organic supermarket, and I used to make sandwiches. I think that was the first job I got when I moved out to California. Yeah, that's where I met Will Gibson. Some of you know. Mel Gibson's son worked there. He had a summer job there. I swear to God. It's Malibu. That's what he wanted. He was actually a really nice kid. I got along with him really well. He was fun. He's a good kid. But when I was there, I had just recently become a Christian, so I was really geared up. They put it in your mind, get out there and witness the gospel. So I was a lot more, I wasn't quite the in-your-face Christian, but I was pretty darn close. And so everybody there knew that I was a Christian, and I actually almost got Mel Gibson's son to come to church with me. I said, you should come to my church. I told him about, the Malibu Vineyard, and you should come and check it out. And he actually said, yeah, maybe I should. I probably should. Almost got him there. Almost reeled him in. That was before Mel put out The Passion. It was before Mel's marriage fell apart. So, anyways, there was one woman there who I told, who everybody there knew I was a Christian because that's how I was geared up then. And one woman there actually said, you must be such a good person. There was one woman there, so there's still the ghost of that idea in the public at large. But how it really works in the real world is nowadays they have seen you coming and they have prepared the ground against you. They have prepared, the propaganda machine has been in full tilt in the culture at large. Here in atheist land for sure, but in the culture at large also, it has been at work against you. They have seen you coming and they've prepared the way against you. Most of the people don't care about religion, they're nons, but even the people who only loosely care about religion, not that much, have a lot of negative ideas if you put that cross on the desk. They're going to think they're a little different than the atheist ones. They won't think he doesn't have any good evidence for his sky fairy. They won't think that. They don't even know what that means. They'll think something he's probably a hypocrite. That's a big one. They'll probably think you're a hypocrite. They'll be looking for signs of hypocrisy as soon as you open your mouth. If you don't recognize that that's true, get out of the apologetics industry. Why? Because you're probably not helping. Honestly, if you don't recognize that I'm telling you the truth, that they immediately have things about you, and they're going to start immediately looking for what you say and what you do and parsing it out differently than any other person, and they saw the cross, I promise. They saw it. You don't have to say anything else. Why? They saw the freaking cross. So, if you are actually trying to accomplish something in this space and anywhere, if you're actually trying to win people over as a Christian, rule number one, as I said, Ron, it's what we were talking about is the right thing. Be cool and reasonable is step one. Appear cool and reasonable. It's easier to do if you are. Just common sense would dictate. How do I appear cool and reasonable, Craig? I don't know. Work on it. First, you got to be cool and reasonable. And step number one is establish rapport. Step number two, there is no step number two. You have to the first and most important job, I think, I could be wrong about this. I'm willing to discuss this. I'm willing to debate this, bro. But I think job number one is actually shatter those mythologies, shatter those paradigms, shatter those preconceived notions about who you are. I think that's the most important thing. That's a really easy thing to do. Just don't embody the stereotypes. That's it. That's all you got to do. And all you got to do is interact with people and be cool and reasonable. The less you say, the better. Why? Because they know you're a Christian. Once you tell somebody they're Christian, they know it. They'll never, ever, ever forget that information. Ever. And some people, even to this day, will still have that still means something positive. It does. For example, because sometimes in Christianity, the atheists argue against this a lot. They call it the meager moral fruits of theism is the actual argument. It's a really interesting argument to discuss. But even in today's world, the idea that you do something by virtue of your service for the Lord hasn't been entirely thrown out. There is still such a thing. My wife, for example, is a perfect example of this. A lot of times my wife is the most popular person amongst her friends. Why? Because she generally goes to service for her friends. She helps them a lot. And a lot of the times when she does service for other people, in the back of her mind is, this is what God would have me do. I swear to God, it's tied to I swear to God. See, I don't say it all that much. Luke's probably not listening. Luke, I don't say it all that much. You misrepresented me, Luke. There was a whole thing. He did an imitation of me, and then I did, I showed my imitations, which were rock solid and really, really good, I gotta say. So my wife sometimes does things for people. In the back of her mind is, by virtue of being Christian, this is the Lord's work. This is what the Lord would want me to do. And she does it a lot. So much so that, for example, one of her friends is this kind of white trash, goofy guy. He's a good guy, but, he's really dysfunctional. He's an alcoholic. He's a really good guy, but he's just out there. He's fun. But he's, she was working with him once. That's how she met him. And if it wasn't for her, he never would have gotten to visitation rights with his kid, never would have gotten partial custody of his kid. Why? He wasn't functional. He couldn't go to a court, couldn't do any of that stuff. So she stepped in and took care of all of it. All of it. Without her, he never would have been able to see his kid. She did that as a service to him, but as partially, if she ever balks, sometimes she does a lot of stuff like that. For example, our neighbor right over here, his living girlfriend of 30 years died. Common law wife, basically his wife, died. Now, we don't know him all that well. We're on a hey, how you doing, Dean? That type of relationship. I like him, he's a good guy. But we're not really good friends with him. He's never come over to the house. I fed their cats a couple times when they went on vacation. It's one of those type of relationships. She doesn't know him all that well. But when his wife died, she got a lot of phone calls from him. Isn't that interesting? Why'd she get phone calls from him? Because he knew she'd call her back. All the other friends of his probably wouldn't call because they knew that he was going to be asking for something, needed some help. She called him back. Probably nobody else did. Part of the reason she called him back is because she's a Christian. A Christian is supposed to be, now I'm not saying that this actually works, but this is what a Christian is supposed to be. And if you're a Christian, this is who you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be the type of person that your neighbor car breaks down at 3 a.m. and they'll go, call Craig. Why? He's a Christian, he'll help us out. He means it. They have a gay son, call Craig. He's gonna persecute our gay son. They immediately think that's what should be happening. Now, I'm not saying that is happening and your neighbors are going to do that. I'm just saying the ghost of that is still there, as evidenced by the fact that my wife would get calls from my neighbor after his girlfriend died. Why? Because he knew she'd call her back. And in the back of his mind, he knew that had something to do with her Christianity. Yeah, granted, my wife is just a nice person, and it's a good thing to do, and it's the right thing to do. But part of how I could always, the times where she starts hesitating, I've never had to do this, but I easily could go, Jen, this is what God would want you. I could peer pressure her by virtue of her being Christian into going, doing a little bit more for that person. Never have to do it. Why? She only sometimes hesitates or doesn't feel like doing it or complains about it. But she basically always does do service for a lot of people. She's a good person that way. She's a really good person that way. Really good character in some ways. Really good character. So, where am I going with all this? Circa 1955, you put a cross on their desk, all the associations about you would have been positive, 100% positive. People would have thought you were honest, they would have thought you were upright, they would have thought, when you get off work, you probably build orphanages for they probably thought you were a good and decent man, he's a Christian. Nowadays, that paradigm has kind of been thrown out the window. The first and most of the associations about you are going to be almost automatically negative. So job number one is shatter those stereotypes. If you can't actually be a practicing Christian where you are of service to your fellow man, if you can't internalize the gospel to the point where you're actually a better person than most people because you are willing to, help people out and go the extra mile, what does the Bible actually say? That they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. That's the actual command of the Scripture. If you aren't actually, walking the walk to that degree, I don't really think many of you are. Ron does it a little. I know he has because I've seen him do it. If you're not actually walking the walk to that degree, at least don't be part of the problem. Don't be hateful and hypocritical and in their face and wagging their finger at them. If you can't walk the walk to the degree that you're a Craig Reed, humble, lovable, saintly, of service to his fellow man. That's basically me in a nutshell. I understand. That's a really good man, Craig. I understand that. You sound like a really good human being, Craig. I understand that. Yeah, I understand. Hold your applause. Hold your applause. No, if you can't actually internalize the gospel that you are of use to your fellow man out of service to God, of love and humility, if you're not quite walking the walk to that degree, and guess what? You're not. Yeah, let's just be perfectly honest. You're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. Because I know who you are, and I'd see it. It'd be pretty darn obvious. No, none of us are. Okay, I'm not saying I am. I'm playing around. Obviously, I'm not necessarily either. My wife is a little bit sometimes. So that's where we're at. At least don't be part of the problem. Don't be hypocritical, hateful, yada, yada, yada. Job number one is establish rapport. Step number two, there is no step number two. Now let's get to the why of the matter, because that's actually the real subject that I'm hammering away at. Metaphysical a priori assumptions. That's why. That's why. You put a cross down on the desk, people automatically assume things about you. If they're negative things, you don't want any of those things to be correct. So don't be anti-science, don't be anti-gay, don't be dumb. Dumb you can't help. You're so sorry, you just can't, you can't help it. All right, fine, you can be dumb. Don't be actively dumb. Don't be stupid. Don't be actively, aggressively, in their face stupid. Why? Because it's not helping. It's really not. It's not, trust me. But metaphysical a priori assumptions are the entirety of the ballgame. The paradigmatic example is Pine Creek Doug. He's my go-to atheist at this point. So he's in a resurrection debate. By the time he's in a resurrection debate, you've already missed the mark with him. Why? Because you've got to get at he is adjudicating the facts of the matter from a totally different paradigm of reality than you are. And firmly embedded in his mind is the metaphysical a priori assumption the supernatural does not occur. You might as well not even bother compiling the material facts of the resurrection. You might as well not even bother. Don't bother with that debate. Why? Because A, it's the centerpiece debate of Christianity, so you're basically stiffening their resistance right from the jump. Here's the centerpiece miracle of Christianity. Let me show you the facts, and I'm pretty sure you're going to agree that it happens. Come on. Come on. If you were actually trying to win him over, you have to come at him a lot more subtly. This is why the Bible says to plant seeds. Plant seeds. It's the only way you get at people's metaphysical presuppositions. How? The planting of seeds. You have to somehow erode his firmly resolved confidence that the supernatural does not occur. As I pointed out, with Pine Creek Doug, it is a lot more firmly embedded in him than it is than other atheists. A lot of other atheists have compromises with that. Things that are supernatural in origin and they kind of believe them. Like ghosts or whatever. God. Like God. No, not usually God. But like ghosts and goblins or whatever. They believe in some supernatural things. If you ever notice the nones and you're an atheist and you rejoice at the fact that everyone's becoming a non, don't bother. Why? Because they're not atheists. Go talk to nones. Most nones actually readily believe in God. And part of the reason why they readily believe in God, I've talked to a lot of nones, even here in California, is because there are supernatural things that happened in their life. or things that they ascribe supernatural agency to. Go ask them if you don't believe me. You, the atheist, probably won't be convinced that it's a supernatural occurrence, but they're not willing to write it off. Some of them are plausible, some of them are not so plausible. If you wanted to work on Pine Creek Doug, who, of all of the atheists, I think it's most resolute in him what the supernatural does not occur. A lot of atheists aren't that committed to that. Like I said, some of them are mixed on that. With him, it's pretty resolved. So, it's, as I said, when he was asking me about my religious experience, he never asked me a single question. He didn't think he had to. He didn't ask me any investigating, any, let me lay the groundwork and try and just establish the facts of the supernatural experience or the spiritual experience. Why did he not do that? He didn't think he had to. He just had to ask me a few questions to show this poor, dumb, deluded Christian that it wasn't God. That's it. That's all he thought he had to do. Nothing that he needed to explore or investigate at all. Why? Because it's really firmly resolved in his mind the supernatural does not occur. It's really deep in there. If you wanted to move the needle with him at all, pointing the facts of the resurrection ain't going to do it. You have to get at that. That's the metaphysical a priori commitment, and it's really strong and resolved in him. So you'd have to come at him subtly and plant seeds to get him to weaken that position. You get it? You get it. So if you were charged with doing it, you know, if you're a person who wants to formulate apologetics off of what I'm saying in this particular video, the right idea is, Stephanie, with the Shroud of Turin. Shroud of Turin is the wrong example, though. Why? Because they already come loaded for bear. Shroud of Turin is a buzzword. It's like you might as well have just said Bigfoot or aliens. You know, they already, it's outlandish, we can write it off. Nobody's going to actually even examine those facts from a non-biased point of view, I promise. I'm pretty sure, at least. Why? Shroud of Turin. And you might have well said Bigfoot really happened, or... You know, I stopped using even the example of Bigfoot as an analogy in my videos. Why? Because some atheists are so far gone, they would go, "Yo, I can't believe you're so dumb, you believe in Bigfoot." I didn't say I believe in Bigfoot, you dopey clown. You're so dumb. I said I used a whole complicated analogy, and I realized I was undercutting the whole analogy. Why? Because a lot of atheists can't even see past the word Bigfoot. They go, it's outlandish, I do, the Christian's so dumb. I swear to God. Go look at the comments. There are literally comments that say, "I can't believe you're so dumb you believe in Bigfoot." And I never said in the video, I believe in Bigfoot. I used a complicated analogy about if you see something with your own eyes, that is evidence of its actuality. The only thing some atheists heard was, "Oh my God, Craig is so dumb, he believes in Bigfoot." Why? Because they're like that. Because they're like that. That's how it works. In the real world, you are up against a propaganda machine that is deep, and it is getting at people and really, really moving on the culture in complicated ways. In this space, you have a propaganda machine wherein every time you use a word supernatural, they automatically, now, I always accept these guys. I bring you up too much, Craig. I understand I bring them up a lot. But they are emergent phenomena within atheism. They're very important. Why? Because I cannot stress this enough. The first most common type of atheist is a debate me bow clown, right? Everybody gets that. The second most common type of atheist is an honest actor who, when you say check the receipts, guess what they're going to do? They're going to check those freaking receipts. When you say the evidence suggests X, they're going to examine the evidence. And if you're right, they'll go, "Yeah, Craig's right. The evidence suggests X." Why? Because they actually do value critical thinking. They don't just give lip service to it. They actually think correctly that critical thinking and evidence-based conclusions are an important way of approaching the world. And they're correct about that. They heavily value that, and they mean it. They aren't kidding about that. Now, those guys aren't going to check Bigfoot either. Or not Bigfoot. You may be right about the Shroud of Turin, Stephanie. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying Shroud of Turin is like Bigfoot, aliens. Your advertising, don't take this seriously. The wiser course of action, if you want to move the needle, is find an even better, miracle that nobody's heard of, closer to home, that's been evidenced in a way that an atheist would go, "Wow, this really does seem like evidence, like it was videotaped or something like that." Or even Deacon Murderman was like, "Okay, I'm a little convinced that might happen." Even then, don't expect too much. Why? Because you're only planting seeds. You're only planting seeds. That's it. It's the only job you've ever been charged with. I become like everybody so that I might win some. That's the only thing the Bible tells you to do. Pal around with them. Get to know them. defang Christianity. Be the witness that they go, well, at least there's one good Christian in the world. It's easy to do, Stephanie. You were doing it right. You've done it right a bunch of times, actually. Rebecca is the perfect example. Okay? The Bible actually instructs you, the practicing Christian, what? Be harmless as a dove and wise as a serpent. Wise as a serpent, all of you go home, not even close. Not even close. But harmless as a dove, Stephanie, not that far. Rebecca is actually, as far as I can tell, harmless is hitting that mark. Pretty much, it looks like it to me. Most of the atheists like her. They go on her channel and she's, warm and loving and makes them feel they like her. They like her a lot. We like her better than you, Craig. I said, I probably didn't say that you wouldn't. Because she's nice. Harmless as a lamb, she is mastered. Wise as a serpent? No, she's not even close. Not even close. There's only one person in here who's even close to that, and I won't mention my name, or their name. I won't mention my name. Did I say that out loud? Yeah, I did. I'm the only one who's even close. But, so, that is what you are instructed to do. Break bread with the heathen, with the terrible people, and see the good in them. Break bread. It's really easy to do, actually, because most of the atheists are, or not most, that's probably exaggerated. A lot of the atheists are cool. Yes, there's a huge chunk of the atheists that are annoying as F, like really annoying, like unbelievable. But if you commiserate with the cool atheist about the annoying atheist, then you have something to bond over. Like, why is that guy allowed in your tribe? He's a total clown. And they'll go, yeah, bitch, spot, box, spot. Yeah, he's totally ridiculous. We understand that. We wish he would quit atheism too. But what are we going to do? Because he's embarrassing himself and doesn't even know it. The joke is on him the entire time. There's a lot of guys like that. Goofy, aggressive, in-your-face dumbasses. There's a lot. That's a really common type of atheist. Like really goofy and in your face, and ostensibly they're a little bit more intelligent than your average Joe, and to some degree they in fact are. I won't bring up his name because I mentioned him too much, but the paradigmatic example we were debating with the other day about religion being a mental illness. That's the only guy who ever debates me on Twitter these days. He does it a lot. It's just like every 3 days or 4 days. So your goal is establish rapport. Step 2, there is no step 2. If you want to have well-constructed arguments, that's fine. That's what we're doing. That's apologetics in a nutshell. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying, the less you do that when you're actually engaged in interacting with people, the better. Because it's counterproductive. The argument that you're laying, unless you got something really new from left field, the argument that you're about to present, they've already been loaded up against. Correct? Correct. So they already have some of their easy points to score against it. Correct? Correct. Okay, so you're not really helping. You're just reminding them that you're a Christian and, reminding me that these arguments aren't very good. Now, if you're an atheist, don't get cozy with the idea that the arguments aren't very good. Why? Because that's a relatively recent phenomenon. The most of the arguments that we trace back to, like, let's say the Aristotelian arguments can be traced mostly back to Thomas Aquinas, okay? When Thomas Aquinas was making those arguments, it was a parlor game. There was no dog in the fight. He wasn't like, I really got to think this through clearly. Why? Because I got to prove to atheists that God exists. It was like, if I were charged, it was kind of like, I don't know this for a fact, it's just a really good educated guess. Why? Because there was no such thing as an atheist back then. So he was kind of going, if I were charged with proving God exists, ha ha ha, everybody knows that God exists, because everybody back then believed that God exists, how would I do it? So they're philosophical and they're not entirely all that robust. They need to be updated. When they're updated, they might actually get us over the finish line. They really might. I mean, I'm sort of... The one that I keep going back to is sort of loosely related to the pre-supper argument, but it's also loosely related to the fourth proof of what is Edward Feser's 5 proofs of God, which are pretty sure those are all the Aristotelian arguments refashioned. Pretty sure, might be wrong about that, or the not Aristotelian. What's his face? Aquinas. But the fourth one is the one that I've zeroed in on. Why? Because that's the one that's going to move the needle. Math. The fourth one is the argument. It's not actually math. It's the argument from eternal truth. And what the flaw in the mechanism of all of the apologetics arguments for God is they try to get you to God too quickly. They are basically faith-based conclusions masquerading as evidence-based conclusions. They assert. And once they assert, that's why Matt Dillahunty is so confident that he never faces anyone that he's going to have to deal anything about. Why? Because he can zero in really quickly on where is something being asserted without evidence. Anytime you assert something, there's got to be evidence for the conclusion. That is evidentiarism in a nutshell. Now, the problem with evidentiarism when we're talking about the supernatural is there comes a time where some of the things you are trying to evidence for, and this particular, I mean evidence as an empirical, okay, supernatural by definition means what? Outside of the natural, ergo outside of the purview of empirical investigation. That's the problem. There's only so far it's going to get you. That's why I started looking into pre-suppers. Why? Because there's a core of truth there that needs to be extracted and pulled out. And then it can be applied to the, if you're an atheist, relax. This isn't an argument. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm telling you my thought process ahead of time. Why? There's nothing you can do about it. If I'm right, give me the tithes and we'll be done with it. But the logic is, okay, there's the core of the, if you know anything about Kant, let's go back to that. Kant was actually, to some degree, a refutation of empiricism. He was actually trying to deal with Hume. He even said, Hume woke me up out of my slumber. I've got to deal with Hume. Now, Hume, in his empiricism and his epistemology, Hume is the one who is still influencing the atheist community to this day. Matt Dillahunty, if he's read any philosopher in full, it's Hume only. And he cites Hume more than any other philosopher. Doubt he's ever read any of the others. I'm not sure if he's read all of Hume either, but Hume is the one who's influencing him. Hume is the one influencing the atheist community this day. Okay? And there was a refutation of Hume. The reason why the refutation isn't that well known is because Kant is notoriously hard to understand. And he even titled his magnum opus, A Critique of Pure Reason, rather than what it was, which is somewhat misleading. There's a lot of things in Kant that minimized, as influential as he was, there's a lot of aspects of Kantianism that haven't translated as well as they might have. Why? Because he's so notoriously hard to understand. So he calls himself a transcendental idealist. That threw everybody. Why? Because ostensibly he was refuting idealism. Yeah, it gets confusing for a lot of people. But, so I won't go into that. Empiricism, what's his face in a nutshell? Hume. Matters of fact and relation of things. That was his epistemology. Now that's incomplete, really obviously. Okay, but that's what it was. Matters of fact and relations of things. He didn't have a really good way of there was something missing. That's why Kant went to work on it. And where the real transcendental argument can be sourced back to Kant. X is a necessary precondition of Y therefore X. And the argument, if you are not overly ambitious with the argument, can be a solid proof for certain types of transcendental categories, as I pointed out. It doesn't work as, with the mistake that the pre-suppers make is they stretch it to God is the necessary precondition of intelligibility. And as I pointed out a few times, that doesn't work like that. Why? Because you're asserting God. Yeah, you can make coherent sense of things like the laws of logic if you assert God. That's the argument. And it's essentially correct, but you're still asserting God. You're not proving to atheists that God exists. You're saying, hey, atheist, if you assert God too, now you can make coherent sense of the laws. So that's kind of the underlying logic. That's not exactly it, but it's close enough that you understand the point. That's basically what they're saying. Hey, Mr. Atheist, if you assert God too, now you can account for the laws of logic. Okay, but when they're actually in the debate, if the atheist grants you the starting point, and a lot of atheists will, yes, the laws of logic exist, they're inviolate. Matt Dillahunty granted it twice, and I assume he will continuously grant it. Other atheists who have been in those arguments grant the laws of logic too. Now, the laws of logic you may have heard are under assault. It's not all of them, it's only one or two. I think it's the law of excluded middle, and perhaps the law of non-contradiction, because there's such a thing as a paradox, which isn't technically a non-contradiction. But I'm not sure. I haven't really dug into that, so it's not really relevant. Why? Because you only need one law of logic, the law of identity. or you only need mathematical axioms. That's it. Strip it down to its most simplistic form, and you have two transcendent categories that almost every atheist listening to me will grant as a starting point. Yes, the laws of logic exist. They're transcendent, immaterial, inviolate, and invisible. Matt Dillahunty granted that on two separate occasions. Now that's really important. Why? Because he's already giving us something that sounds suspiciously like transcendent other, that sounds suspiciously like, if you water down the definition of God to a Spinoza-like God, which is like the sum total of natural laws or laws of physics, why isn't Matt Dillahunty already saying that that's there? You get it? Why? I mean, you know, I understand if you're an atheist, that doesn't quite add up, but you tell me why not. What's the difference? If I define God as transcendent other than the natural world, and then I have you admitting that your starting point you have to presuppose is a law of logic, and Matt Dillahunty said, why is Matt Dillahunty using the law of logic? Because you need to as a precondition of intelligibility. That part is correct. Okay, now you have a law of logic that Matt Dillahunty, your biggest dog in the fight, admitted is there. He said he presupposes it. That's how he knows it's there. He presupposes it's there. Why? Because he needs to use it sometimes for clear and robust thinking of logical axioms, logical proofs and things like that. So it's a precondition of intelligibility. And he told us, okay, yes, I acknowledge the laws of logic exist. They're invisible, immaterial, inviolate, and transcendent. Why isn't he already admitting to a lesser form of transcendent other Spinoza-like God? Why hasn't he already just admitted that? What's the difference? That's what we need to explore. I'm not saying I just sealed it up. I mean, JD, if you want to give me the tithes off of that, go for it. I'll take the tithes. But I'm not saying I just proved it. I'm just saying that's the line of argumentation that needs to be explored fully. And I think it needs to be, you combine that with Phaser's fourth proof, you know, the argument from eternal truth. The reason why the fourth proof doesn't work is that Phaser tries to circle the square too quickly. He points out that there are eternal truths. He uses math. Okay? Those are eternal, incorrigible truths that stand outside of the natural world. Then he tries to say, well, where do they exist? And then he tries to put them in the mind of God. It doesn't really quite work. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a really robust avenue of exploration there wherein we may be able to circle the square. That's my only point. Moving right along. Barring that, let's see where I'm at. Barring that idea, 33 minutes. I mean, really what you are trying to do, okay? There is only so far sufficient evidentiary warrant is going to get you when you are talking about the supernatural. Why? As I already explained, there's a complicated task here for the apologist if you look big picture and really think of what you're trying to accomplish, okay? Sufficient evidentiary warrant means empirical, usually by definition. Once you start talking about the supernatural, you are by definition outside the purview of empirical investigation. Supernatural, outside of the natural. That's why I started zeroing on math. Why? Because math is technically supernatural in a sense too. That's why I'm going to start looking at the atheist arguments that are anti-naturalist I'm pretty sure there's going to be a thoroughly constructible roadmap here. I'm not positive, but I think so. But, so that type of, what we are now, put that aside for a second, let me go back to the original point. There's only two ways that you move the needle. Yeah, probably shouldn't have even gone down that road. I was just thinking out loud. A lot of times I do that in my videos, I think out loud. That's why I make the videos the way I do. Why? Because I like to talk about things to clarify my thoughts. So you might not even hear this video. If you're hearing this video, I decided to post it. I post a lot. I make a lot more videos than I post. If you hear this video, I posted it. If you did not hearing this, guess what? We're not hearing each other. Now, getting back to the main issue, because this is really the main issue. How you get people to flip metaphysical a priori assumptions the entirety of the ballgame. And how you do that is they identify with you. So there's only two ways it works. Propaganda and the planting of seeds. The planting of seeds is the same thing as propaganda. It's the same idea. If you ever paid attention to atheist counter-apologetics, there's one main type that they would go back to the well time and time again. Why? Because it's a really effective propaganda piece. And I'm not saying it's a good argument. It's absolute horrendous abomination of an argument. Why? Because it is irrelevant in terms of logic and propositional force. It's completely irrelevant. But as a propaganda piece, they go through to it time and time again. The problem for the atheists is that debate is going to disappear pretty soon. Why? Christians may be dumb, but we're not that dumb. We're not going to continuously fall for it. And more importantly, probably atheists on your own squad are going to start calling you out. Why? Because, as I said, the second most common type of atheist is an honest actor who doesn't want to play around with stupidity and will actually start calling it out if it starts to become too obvious to them. You know, if I say somebody's playing teams and you don't see it, you know, I could eventually appeal to the two other atheists that I know, and they'll go, if I'm right, they'll go, yeah, he's playing teams, you're correct. And they'll start calling him out. That's why I said the philosophical, honest actor atheists are way more our allies than our opponents. Again, I said that about Dave Rollins the other day, and then he went and took somebody to task again for saying, you know, this time young earth creation is a mental illness. Young earth creation is not a mental illness. It's not even close. Rebecca is a young earth creationist. Why is she a young earth creationist? Because she's nothing even remotely crazy or delusional about her. She may believe things that you think are false. Why does she do that? Because she holds to a position because she thinks it's true. That's why metaphysical a priori assumptions are so important. Rebecca is an intelligent person. Why is she a young earth creationist? Because she thinks it's true, and to some degree she thinks it's synonymous with Christianity. That's the trap. That's how they deconverted a lot of fundamentalist Christians. Why? Because they were holding positions that were false, and the church hammers away, thinking they're doing a service. The two ones that are the strongest are the inerrancy of the scripture and young earth creationism. Inerrancy of the scripture, they hammer away. To Dr. Josh, they did the same thing. He's told us this. Okay? In his mind, they hammered away. If one note or tittle of this book is proven wrong, the whole of Christianity collapses. Not the whole of the inerrancy collapses, which makes sense logically. The whole of Christianity, your faith has no grounding at all. Why do they do that? I'm not sure. Because they don't realize how stupid and self-defeating that actually is. You're basically telling somebody, if you find any, I don't know why they do that. A lot of times Christians don't think through the things that they're actually presenting, and they're stupid and self-defeating. I've pointed out the one that I've heard at church. 99% obedience is still disobedience. Everyone goes, woo, cheerleading for Jesus, yeah, we're 100% obedient. None of those people are 100% obedient. They're not even freaking close. They're not even freaking close. It was like a charade of obedience. Let's all pretend that we're 100 times more obedient than we in fact are. It's idiotic. It's idiotic. The more honest you are about where you're actually at in your Christian walk, the better you're going to do. Why? Because there's no point in fooling yourself. I am the most obedient Christian I know. I'm the most obedient Christian I've met in any church I've ever gone to. I promise. That's why nobody rolls up on me. Did you ever notice that? That none of the holy rollers come around here to try and take me out? I thought I'd face a lot of them. I faced none. Why? Because somewhere inside they know that. I'll out-holy them immediately. Why? Because I ain't playing. I ain't faking. I ain't walking a walk then pretending I'm doing something I'm not. If I'm not doing things exactly Christian, the way a Christian will, I'll tell you straight up. I won't mince words. Yeah, I get a little, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm not doing, if I were doing anything wrong, theoretically, in theory, I'm not. But no, honestly, that's why I would, there's a lot of the guys I pal around with, and a lot of people who they interact with out there in Christian land are these like holier than thou types. Those are worse than the baby roast. That's the most common type of Christian, I may not be the most common type, but it's a pretty common type. It's the one that most people associate with the Christian. What? A holier than thou type. They roll up on you to out-holy you. Oh, I'm so obedient. That's full of garbage. Full of garbage. When that pastor said that in the church, everyone rah-rah. I'm the most obedient person in that room. By a lot. By a lot. I've been dismayed at their sloppiness and their stupidity. Dismayed at it. Often. And here this goofball is saying, if you're not 99% obedient, it's disobedient. And they're not even close to 99% obedience. It's a charade of obedience. It's offensive to me to some degree. Why? Because it's a total joke. It's a total joke. Actually costs you something to be obedient. It's actually challenging and hard. It's not something you can just go rah, rah, rah. It's not. You know, don't get me started. It's really not. But anyways, okay, didn't mean to freak out. Anyways, so that's part of the problem. Christians engage in, a lot of what is happening is Christians think they're doing a service to themselves or Christianity, and they're not. They're going about things in ways that are self-defeating. It's not unique to Christianity. It's a common problem in every group of people under the sun you're ever going to meet. Christians don't have a monopoly on phoniness. We don't have a monopoly on hypocrisy. We don't have a monopoly on any of the bad traits you associate with Christianity. We don't. Tribalism, we aren't innately more tribal than other people. I was shocked to find atheists tribal and dogmatic. I was shocked about that. I was really surprised by that. Why? Because you wouldn't think it would be. But yet it is. Because a lot of them specifically left Christianity because it was too rigid and ideological and dogmatic and people were too tribal. Okay, and then you become the exact same thing under the banner of atheism? How does that make any sense? It doesn't. It's really bizarre, self-defeating behavior. That's why a lot of atheists quit atheism. They quit. Why? Because they don't want to act like that. And they recognize that it was paradoxical. It's deeply paradoxical. Paradoxical to the point like you're practically a walking contradiction if you're a dogmatic ideological atheist. You make no sense. A dogmatic ideological Christian, at least it makes some sense. Why? Because they're not saying, I'm not dogmatic and ideological. Alyssa Chalmers, let's just say she's the paradigmatic example. She's not saying I'm not dogmatic and ideological. She's actually saying the opposite. I am dogmatic and ideological, and you're supposed to be. Why? Because you're supposed to practice the Bible this way, this way, this way. That's what she's saying. So there's no contradiction there. I don't happen to agree with her, but there's no contradiction there. She's not a walking caricature, a walking self-parody. A rigid, dogmatic, ideological atheist is a walking self-parody. I'm so against dogmatic, ideological, rigid ideology unless I practice it myself. Then I'll fall for it. It's a walking self-contradiction. It is. Now, maybe I should just wrap it up. Maybe I should just call it a night. Joe, how am I doing? Smashingly good, Greg. You nailed it again. Thanks, Joe. Joe's so encouraging. That's why I like bringing him into the videos. Smashing, you nailing it. I'm not sure if people are even ready for what you're giving them, Greg. It's so far ahead of the curve. It's brilliant. It's really brilliant. See? All right. So cool. So I'm nailing it. All right. I was going to go into a bunch of other things, but I think I've already run out of steam in this particular video. I guess I will wrap it up here. The main point I'm going to hammer away at, I'm not going to hammer away in this particular video. I ran out of steam, and now but the main thing I will be hammering away at is metaphysical a priori assumptions, how they flip, how they develop. How they develop is inference. You give them to yourself. Nobody ever gives them to you. That's why planting of seeds is so effective. Why? Because the person infers things. You don't tell them that. When you tell somebody something, you've broken the spell. You've broken the thing. When you hang out with people, why you became like your friends. Did you ever notice that? That's why your mother told you not to hang out with that bad group of friends. Why? Because you become like them. And you said, oh, no, it won't happen to me. Then you hang out with that bad group of friends, and guess what? You became like them, because that's how it works. You pal around with people, you start associating with people who believe X about something, and the less they try to convince you that X about something is correct, the more likely you are to start believing it. That's the paradox. If they start trying to convince you of it, you'll put up your resistors. Promise. My mom was trying to turn us into liberal, carbon copies of her our entire life. The paradigmatic example is my nephew. My nephew, who my wife gets along with really well, is like full sold out red state, joined the Marines. His parents are freaking as liberal hippie as it gets. But they tried to impress it on him. So he balked. He spit it out. Why? Because when someone tries to push it on you, you almost intuitively and automatically go, it has a lot to do with how branding actually works. If somebody is trying to sell you a product, you ever think about that? What's the type of product that everyone gravitates towards? If somebody's actually trying to sell you a product and it's too obvious, they're trying to push a product on you, you immediately start recoiling. Why? Because your innate spidey sense starts tingling. They wouldn't be pushing it on me if it were any good. Correct? Correct. This person wouldn't be trying to sell me on their value system if their value system spoke for itself. You get it now? You really want to be an effective Christian? You internalize the value system of Christianity and you tone it down to the best of your ability and don't say a word. St. Francis of Assisi even said this. Preach the gospel. If necessary, use words. Don't use words. Don't do it. Why? The less you say, the better. The more you embody whatever you think is the most important virtue of being a Christian, the better off you're going to be. If you can actually embody it, great. You know, a lot of us can't. I can, most of a lot of us. Did I say a lot of you can? A lot of you guys can't. I can, most people can't. I'm good at some of them, terrible at others. I'm good at some. Getting along with people, which I think is a Christian virtue, I'm great at. Been doing it my whole life, really good at it. Outside of even this space, I'm even better than I am here. There's not a person in the world in real life that I can't interact with. Within 5-10 minutes, break through your resistance. I can stay out and hang out with you till 3 in the morning. There's not a group alive. That includes everybody. Gangbangers, freaking Republicans, liberals, anybody you could think of. I've been there, hung out with them till 3 in the morning and got along with them really well. I'm really good at it in real life. Really am. I'm excellent at it. Peerless in, you know, I guess that's not a Christian virtue, but I kind of think it is. Maybe stretching it with that one. Is that a Christian virtue? I kind of think it is. I become like everybody so that I might win some. I'm really good at like fitting in, becoming like one of the crowd. I do it really easily. It's easy. It's just there's a methodology to it. It's really easy to do. But okay, so I guess I'll wrap up the video. The less you do, the less you try to sell Christianity to people, the better off you will be. Why? Because people innately recoil when you are trying to push something on them. And their spidey sense tingles and they go, they wouldn't be trying to push this on me if the product were any good. They wouldn't. So the less you do, the better. The less you try and tell people this is what Christianity did for me or whatever. I know some of you mean well, you know, Christians mean well when they do that stuff. It's just usually not, it's counterproductive, that's all. You know, I'm not saying it's harmful. I'm not saying Christians are wrong for doing that. If you think, you know, Jesus turned your life around and you tell people Jesus turned your life around, that's positive. That's a good thing to do. That's not really, you know, I'm not going to tell you not to do it. I'm just saying, you know, embody it is better. And the less you try to push it on somebody, the more curious about it they will get. That's how I see it. But anyways, I guess I'll wrap it up for now. Yeah, it wasn't quite the slam dunk that the videos usually are. I can't win them all, Greg. You know, Chideo, it's still smashingly good. Still miles above everyone else's videos, Craig. So you gotta look at it that way. You're putting out actual content. The rest of the people just spinning the wheels, wasting their time. Yeah, good point, Joe. That's a really good point. All right, so with that little note of encouragement to me from Joe, not me, Joe. No, it wasn't actually Joe. I know it was really, really true to life. I've worked on the character a lot. That's why it's so true to life and so realistic, because I've captured a lot of the essence of what he's about. And no, that wasn't that. I get a lot of emails, especially when I do my Stephanie imitation. Stephanie, yes, Greg. Get a lot of emails, people going, was Stephanie actually in the video with you? No, I'm actually making that up on the spot. I know it's really good. It's really good, Greg. I understand that. It's really convincing. I thought it was Stephanie. It's not Stephanie. You sure? No, I'm positive. Stephanie, yes, Greg. Is this really you? No, it's you making a voice of me. Okay, see? I just proved it. You could say anything. Type something in, and I'll make Stephanie say that. It's not actually Stephanie. I know I get a lot of emails. Was Stephanie actually in the video with you? Yeah, no, it wasn't. No, she wasn't. She was not. I was doing an imitation of Stephanie that's, you know, really true to life. What do you want me to say? It's great acting, Greg. I understand that. I understand it's great acting. I wasn't really asking for you to tell me the obvious. Yeah, it's fantastic acting. I get that. That's what I'm really good at doing Stephanie imitations. I know. Thank you for your, thank you for noticing the obvious, but didn't really need to hear it. So there you go, kids. With that, I will wrap her up. Another victorious video under my belt. If you didn't think this one was great, you're mistaken. So there you go, kids. That is all for now. The mass is ended. Go in peace. Amen.